Well, good evening, everyone. I'm sitting upstairs after having just put the little man to sleep and just thought I would hop on a little bit to wade in the waters of this Stephen Furtick controversy. I don't know if it's a controversy, but anyway, it's fun and it's something I like to dip my toes in from time to time. Doing it by video because I never do video. So why not kind of hop on and see what that's all about? Got some editing things on the phone I'm trying to play with a little bit. But for those of you who don't know, Stephen Furtick, head pastor, face of the Elevation Church, big satellite mega church based in North Carolina, but they have all over the place. South Carolina, Florida, even one in Ontario, Canada, I believe. And his sermon on this past Sunday, the 19th, was about Mark 6:5, I believe it was the passage he used. And the big quote is this 50-second clip that's been going around the internet, but this big quote was, the one thing Jesus can't do is overcome your unbelief. And of course, that has set social media ablaze with controversy. Some people in support, some people calling him a heretic, others just politely disagreeing with it. It's interesting. And it's an interesting thought. From my first observance is we really have this thing, and there's been a lot of folks on social media that I'm friends with that love and respect tremendously, that have really given a lot of good insight into this. But one thing I notice in Christian culture and Christian theology today is we really have this knee-jerk repulsion to any kind of negative thought or say about anything regarding Christ or God or anything. And I'm not saying that God or Christ or anything of the sort deserves negative say. Not at all saying that. But in this particular case, I think there is a logical conclusion that I get where Furtick is coming from. I personally do not find what he said in the sermon to be that controversial. And I'll try to lay out why quickly. This notion of God being limited in some regard or not being able to create certain things is a logical, consistent thing. For example, God cannot create a round square. God cannot create a married bachelor, for example. These things are antithetical. They can't exist in the same space. These are just rules of our universe, right? And therefore, with this logical consistency, we can't logically state that there are some things that, perhaps cannot be overcome or can't be limited in some form or fashion in regards to our own theology and in our own understanding of God. And understand the examples I'm giving that I just gave are examples cited by William Lane Craig, who's a brilliant Christian apologist and Christian philosopher. His theology and beliefs, from everything I've studied of the man, are very orthodox, mainline Christian thought. So anything I'm saying with that is right in line. It's not a controversial thing to say that, is what I'm trying to say. But this idea that God cannot overcome your unbelief, really it boils down to where you fall in your view and in your stance for Christian theology, if you're either Calvinist or Arminian. And that really determines sort of where free will falls for you and how important it is in the relationship between humans and God. My theology personally is much more Arminian than it would be Calvinist. That's partly due to my upbringing in a Free Will Baptist church, which is Arminian, but also my own wrestling with that theology between it and the contrast with Calvinism over the years. That's just kind of where I've landed currently. So I'm much more Arminian in my theology. And I believe that free will is vitally important in our relationship with Christ. So, these examples that have been cited, I've seen one about Lazarus, Martha and Lazarus, and her unbelief being overcome, Saul's unbelief being overcome on the road to Damascus, where he would eventually become Paul. All good examples. But when you boil it all down, their unbelief is conquered by their own willingness to believe. You know what I'm saying? I mean, if Jesus were to come and meet everybody on a road, and the brightness of his glory would blind everybody, there's going to be a lot of folks to change their opinion, right? And so in those sense, sure, Christ overcame their unbelief. But at some point when you boil it down, the person has to make the free will choice to believe. You know, God cannot subvert your conscience to say, okay, well, I'm going to make you believe. I'm going to violate your free will to believe this and to make you, to change you from an unbeliever to a believer, or to conquer your unbelief in that regard. I don't believe that happens, because at the end of the day, our free will and God's grace work hand in hand, in tandem, in this salvation walk in faith that we have as Christians. And God will not, through his own sovereignty, through his own grace, through his own being, subvert our own free will. If he did, then there would be no unbelievers. I mean, that's a logically consistent thing, is it not? So, you know, to me, like I said, I'll wrap it up now, but to me, what Furtick said is not that controversial. It's really not. I'll mull over it some more. If I have some additional thoughts to it, I'll add them in another video. But for me, just listening to it, it's kind of flimming through the service a little bit, the sermon a little bit, and digesting a lot of the comments that folks have posted, not that controversial to me. On the face of it, I get why it's controversial. Saying God can't do something, that's a big no-no. But like I shared with some of the examples, this idea of God being constrained in our space-time universe with certain rules that have been established by him, not that controversial. Okay? Love y'all. Have a good night.